Hello, I'm Bob Parmley. I'm a resident of Sun City in Georgetown. I am a one-time captain in the U.S. Army in Vietnam era. I rise in opposition to a 21st century plaque which is purported to explain the actions of the 19th century. The plaque ignores critical facts. The American voters, constituted virtually entirely of white males, elected the Republican presidential candidate Abraham Lincoln to the presidency in 1860. He was plainly elected upon the expectation that he would lead our great country away from slavery. The ensuing Civil War that was fought to end slavery resulted in the deaths of approximately 650,000 American soldiers, largely white males. Arguably, this enormous sacrifice atoned for the great sin of slavery. We should resist any related 21st century effort to weaken our Union and rewrite our history, including measures to denigrate the memory of Christopher Columbus, George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, and or to dishonor the American flag, the national anthem, and the unsurpassed American Constitution. In lieu of a plaque, I may have a compromise suggestion for you. A much more constructive approach would be to acknowledge history and erect an adjoining monument of similar size and stature and size, honoring the African American civil rights movement. I would propose that the monument include the names of prominent civil rights martyrs and appropriate inscriptions. Here's a quote from Martin Luther King. "We must develop and maintain the capacity to forgive. He who is devoid of the power to forgive is devoid of the power to love. There is some good in the worst of us and some evil in the best of us. When we discover this, we are less prone to hate our enemies."
Guys.
There are of course countless biblical verses concerning the subject of forgiveness, which could be added to the monument, including the Lord's Prayer. If such an effort is mounted, my wife and I will gladly contribute the first $1,000.
I have no confidence that a plaque in and of itself will sufficiently tell the broad background of our environment, and indeed it was 83% whites in Georgetown, in Williamson County in that period of time. We know that Texas during that time was 6th in the nation in the number of lynchings of black citizens. We know that the daughters of what was it called, Civil War, whatever it is, daughters of the Confederacy, were changing textbooks, were really pushing for books to be pulled from schools who did not tell a revisionist version of the history. And then we know into the 70s the textbook still had that in it. I have no confidence that a plaque is going to introduce enough information to really broaden the view of what was going on here. I am fine with the statue staying there, but in and of itself, by itself, it really looks around and says, remember, these laws are written by whites for whites. Come on in the courthouse, if you may. And I have a problem with that. I will not use that side of the courthouse in any pictures that I use of the courthouse, either online or in print, because I just have a problem with it. But we know in Texas, we're still struggling with textbooks that tell the truth. Look at what's in the news this week on our textbooks. People don't know. They know what they were taught. Now, I grew up in the South. I know what my textbooks were saying, and it wasn't the whole side of the story. But I think the statue needs to stay. It's a historical thing. It absolutely showed what was going on in 1916. And oh my gosh, Texas just became enamored with putting statues across, talking about how great the Confederacy was. Well, I mean, I am proud of the South, and I hate Sherman. But it's not because of slavery that I love where I grew up. And I saw the discrimination that happened as I grew up. And when I was back in my hometown in the late 70s to take my grandmother to get her hair fixed, she had a maid who happened to be black that took care of her. I said, let's go downtown. Well, the maid came with me, and she wouldn't even go into the hair salon. And it just threw me because, oh my gosh, I didn't realize that that sort of discrimination and fear was still alive. I am all for trying to enlarge the picture, and let's try to educate how blacks felt, how Hispanics may feel today. But I really don't have good faith that the Texas Historical Commission, who wrote on the plaque that's on the courthouse that the blacks were settlers, 20% of the population were settlers in Williamson County. It's like, well, that's an interesting word to use. I'm not sure they'll be able to, in a plaque, but leave the statue alone, and I hope the public will leave the statue alone. It's an excellent, excellent point to learn.
I, too, have a little trouble with placing a plaque there, a 27 by 42-inch plaque. You know, how can that provide enough information to maybe get to where we need to be on this subject? I do like the idea that was brought up about the possibility of maybe something placed on the other side of the court grounds dealing with civil rights and bringing that part of our history up to date here.
I'm still grappling with what we should do. And then one gentleman, I think it was a Reverend today, mentioned another statue, and that may be the way to do it. I'm a little disappointed, and I mentioned this yesterday to a couple of people. I'm a little disappointed that in the county, in that the only what am I trying to say, soldier that we've got on the ground is Confederate soldier. Why we didn't put other statues on this ground of other veterans, and we did one since I've been judge, and we put it over at the Justice Center of the first veteran that was talking about the Desert Storm, Chapman. Mm-hmm. And why that didn't end up on this ground, I don't know. I was over there and spoke at the dedication. Very proud of that being there. And we certainly could have, I think, softened some of it if we had other veterans on this ground.
I'm willing to talk with those that are trying to find a solution for this issue. I've visited with others that have a different approach than the plaque as an perhaps option, and I would be happy to discuss that with them further.